Ancient Egyptian ladies possessed a profound comprehension of attraction and seduction in its various forms. Their beauty routines were intricate and sophisticated, with the goal of seducing and enthralling the people they were with. It is intriguing to see how these ancient beauty practices continue to have an influence in modern beauty regimens. So let's get ready to learn some of the sex facts you've never heard about women in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptian culture placed a significant emphasis on the usage of perfume, and Egyptian women wore it to heighten their sexual allure. They would combine aromatic oils and resins, thereby producing one-of-a-kind fragrances that reflected who they were as individuals. It was often believed that perfume had aphrodisiac effects, thus it was applied not just to the body, but also to the genital and other intimate areas. It is mind-boggling to consider the role that smell had in the interpersonal dynamics of ancient Egyptian society. They dressed themselves with beautiful jewelry and colorful cosmetics, and they used natural ingredients such as olive oil and honey for their skincare routine. It is intriguing to see how these ancient beauty practices continue to have an influence in modern beauty regimens. Another fascinating feature of Egyptian culture was the art of belly dancing, which was practiced in ancient times. This sensual dance form was performed only by women as a means for them to exhibit their femininity, as well as their seductiveness. It was believed that the fluid movements and rhythmic undulations would arouse desire in both men and women. It was a celebration of sexuality as well as fertility, in addition to being a type of entertainment in its own right. Ancient Egyptian culture revered sexuality and saw it as a holy part of life. Therefore, it was widely honored in that community. Isis, the Egyptian goddess, was revered as the quintessential representation of femininity and sensuality at the time. Therefore, she played a significant part in this context. It was believed that the act of making love was a heavenly connection, and in order to have a sexual life that was both healthy and satisfying, couples sought the blessings of Isis. It is amazing to think about how the ancient Egyptians acknowledged the power of sexuality and linked it to spirituality. The ancient Egyptians were quite knowledgeable about the many different kinds of natural compounds that might boost libido and enhance sexual pleasure. In order to concoct effective aphrodisiacs, they made use of fenugreek, cinnamon, and even crocodile dung as active ingredients. It's fascinating to learn the lengths they went to in order to make their private moments more exciting and fulfill their needs and wants. When it came to questions of sexuality, one of the most striking elements of ancient Egyptian culture was the relatively equal treatment of women. This was one of the most amazing aspects of ancient Egyptian society. Women were not subject to significant repercussions for engaging in activities such as divorcing their husbands, acquiring property, or having extramarital affairs. In contrast to many other ancient civilizations, they did not restrict sexual behavior in any way. This facet of their culture exemplifies the developing nature of ancient Egyptian society and speaks eloquently about its significance. Ancient Egyptians thought that portrayals of animals having sex were less repulsive than those of people having sex. Siblings, corpses, and representations of sex with animals all had a place in ancient Egyptian culture. This does not imply that ancient Egyptians did everything they could think of, or that there was constant partying, though. The ancient Egyptians practiced early kinds of birth control and had harsh laws against things like adultery. They also documented their behaviors, which helped advance sexual activity over the ages, since necrophilia emerged during the embalming procedure. The majority of people are aware that the ancient Egyptians used mummification. Wait until you see the ancient Egyptians if you thought the Romans and the Greeks were unusual when it came to bumping ugly people. Herodotus, an ancient author, reported that there were allegations that at least one embalmer had slept with a beautiful woman's corpse. This raised questions regarding possible relationships between embalmers and renowned or particularly attractive women's bodies. People disapproved of the practice, and if a fellow embalmer was seen using a corpse for sex, they reported him. Families did not immediately hand over the bodies of renowned or particularly attractive women to prevent necrophilia. They may have used gum derived from acacia tree sap to cover the mouth of the womb during sexual activity, according to a method documented on ancient papyrus. The efficiency of this approach is at least partially supported by the fact that acacia gum includes lactic acid, which is known to be a spermicide. Another technique involved coating the inside of the vagina with a solution of honey and sodium bicarbonate. An additional option was a diaphragm-like apparatus consisting of Cleopatra, apparently having other methods to amuse herself when her bedroomers were vacant. According to rumors, she allegedly stuffed bees into a papyrus box or a quarter that had been hollowed out. When the Romans arrived, Cleopatra had an illegitimate son with Julius Caesar. Later, she developed a romantic relationship with Mark Antony, which ultimately resulted in a tragic death. The bees buzzing about inside the equipment would have caused it to vibrate and move around, making it ideal for Cleopatra's alleged purposes. The idea of human-animal mating depicted in the glyphs has a spiritual undertone. Some contend that what appears to be a sexual act between two people is more offensive than what appears to be a sexual act between a human and an animal, because ancient Egyptians thought that physical acts depicted between an animal and a human were less visually offensive than those between two humans. In art, bestiality has a special place. The portrayal of sleeping people is one instance of this. While the majority of individuals in ancient Egypt did not participate in incest, several of the gods and members of the royal family did marry and have children with their siblings. Egyptian mythology contains several examples of brother-sister relationships, such as Seth and his nephews, Osiris and Isis, Shu and Tefnut. In addition, royal families in ancient Egypt commonly got married because they liked to imitate the gods. According to experts, King Tut had a number of health issues, including a crooked spine, a cleft lip, and a degenerative bone disease. Nobody seemed overly concerned about losing one's innocence. Chastity and virginity were not highly valued among the Egyptians. Getting married while still a virgin has no relevance. Premarital affairs were customary, and as long as they occurred between two single individuals, there was no stigma attached to them. For the Romans, who linked female virginity with godliness and saw sexual restraint as a sign of virtue, virginity did not have the same theological importance. If you were a woman, you were essentially trapped in your marriage after it was consummated. Ancient Egyptians held married women in a special place of reverence. If you were a woman, having extramarital affairs was perfectly acceptable, because once you got married, you were essentially locked into that union. Cheating on your spouse was strictly forbidden. It shouldn't be shocking that individuals who were found guilty of infidelity faced harsh penalties. For instance, engaging in a consensual affair with a married lady may lead to both of you being flogged, dismembered, or even executed. However, a married guy who had a sexual relationship with an unmarried lady simply had to face some social stigma. Only two scenarios were allowed for divorce in ancient Egypt. Either the pair didn't have children, or one of the spouses committed adultery. Masturbation was surrounded by divine mystique. The biology of human birth was not a factor in ancient Egyptian myth when creating its gods and goddesses. According to the mythology, the first god, Atum, emerged from a pool of primordials to create himself. He then set about creating the world, but not before masturbating first and spitting out the god Shu and the goddess Tefnut, who went on to create other gods and goddesses. The ancient Egyptians weren't particularly advanced when it came to dirty pictures, unlike the ancient Romans, but they did create at least some pornographic content. The Turin sensual papyrus is the most well-known example of sensual iconography that did exist. Masturbation was viewed as a crucial component of this tale by ancient Egyptians, who gave it a nearly divine quality. Even reports of Osiris's resurrection exist, which is a well-known event in ancient Egyptian mythology. Additionally, it is the historical era's first instance of fellatio. The deity Seth kills and dismembers his brother Osiris, but Osiris's sister Isis combines the pieces in an effort to bring Osiris back to life. They emphasize the male genitalia a lot. Egyptian myth is the first instance of oral history that is known. Amulets shaped like male and female genitalia were frequently worn as a sign of prosperity and reproduction in ancient Egypt. One illustration is the cowrie shell, which resembles female genitalia in shape. Even though semen plays a lofty and spiritual role in many of their myths, the ancient Egyptians had a unique concept of the origin of semen. The spine was thought to be the area of the body that produced this holy substance in ancient Egypt. They thought it came from a sacred vertebra in the spinal column, precisely. After being first presented, this perspective continued to be largely accepted for a very long time. Semen is a soft flow from the spine, according to Plato, who shared this belief. Two gods, semen, and one of the myths that formed the foundation of ancient Egyptian religion. Seth and Horus's narrative has a distinctly sexual undertone, which is related to the culture's more general conceptions of sex, fecundity, origins, and power. In the tale, Seth makes an attempt to pierce Horus when the two gods, Seth and Horus, who have a tense relationship, lie down to rest. Because the other gods would shun Horus if they found out he was the recipient of that union, Poor Isis spreads horse's semen over some lettuce and feeds it to Seth. As a result of this trick, the gods believe that Horus, not Seth, was the one who penetrated him and view him negatively. Eventually, Horus becomes the king of Egypt. Thank you for watching. Bye.